Everybody has an elevated toxic burden. A huge problem in this day and age. We're being bombarded on a daily basis with these environmental toxins and toxicants, and over time we lose chemical tolerance. I make a big deal about the plastic water bottles, and they could make a really big impact on their health. The mattress, not only flame retardants, but other chemicals. Pesticides, a big problem, and not just in the foods we eat, but just being sprayed. If you're having a house regularly sprayed with pesticides, you might want to reconsider it. Even like hardwood floors, because regular hardwood floors also emit toxins. It's your health that you're talking about. So how can environmental toxins or toxicants trigger thyroid autoimmunity? In this presentation, I am going to discuss how to lower your thyroid antibodies by addressing environmental toxins, which of course are a huge problem in this day and age. So let's start by discussing what is the difference between a toxin and a toxicant. A toxin, think of a toxicant as being natural. So for example, mycotoxins from mold are natural, whereas xenoestrogens such as bisphenol A or BPA, that's a toxicant, is man-made. I tend to use the word toxin, but in some cases should be using the word toxicant. But yeah, when I say toxin, I'm many times referring to a toxicant. So just keep that in mind. So how can environmental toxins or toxicants trigger thyroid autoimmunity? What happens is that, the body is very resilient. So we're being bombarded on a daily basis with these environmental toxins and toxicants. And in most cases, our immune system is able to handle this toxic burden. But what happens is over time, with many of us, we lose chemical tolerance. And there could be a few different reasons. One is simply the toxic burden becomes too high, but there also are some genetic factors behind this. So there are some people that, unfortunately, due to their genetics, they can't handle as high of a toxic burden as other people can. So let's briefly discuss some of the mechanisms, or really two mechanisms I want to talk about when discussing how environmental toxins trigger thyroid autoimmunity and thus lead to the formation of thyroid antibodies. So one is through an increase in pro-inflammatory cytokines. So you get chemical exposure, and that causes oxidative stress. And this oxidative stress in turn will activate the T cells of our immune system, and this increases pro-inflammatory cytokines. And as the name implies, pro-inflammatory cytokines promote inflammation. And as far as how they specifically lead to the formation of antibodies, the chemicals also have the ability to bind to the tissue proteins, and then you get the activation of B cells, and this leads to the formation of these autoantibodies. But there's another mechanism, and that is through increasing intestinal permeability, increasing permeability of the gut. So remember, we have that triad of autoimmunity. And with the triad of autoimmunity, there are three factors necessary for autoimmunity to develop. So one is that genetics, and we can't do anything about genetic factors. We could do things to change the expression of our genes, but we can't change our genes. A second component is exposure to one or more environmental triggers. And again, environmental toxins or toxicants can be a direct trigger. But then also we got that third component of the triad, which is the increase in intestinal permeability or a leaky gut. And so these toxins and toxicants in some cases can cause a leaky gut, which can also be a factor in autoimmunity and indirectly lead to the formation of thyroid antibodies. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this episode discussing the different types of environmental toxins and toxicants, as I want to focus more on what you can do to reduce your toxic burden, which in turn can greatly help with lowering and eventually normalizing those thyroid antibodies, especially when these toxins and toxicants are main trigger. But I do want to spend a few minutes discussing some of the more common environmental toxins as well as their sources. So xenoestrogens, and there are different types of xenoestrogens. The most commonly known, bisphenol A, also known as BPA, and common source, plastic water bottles, or there could be other sources, even thermal paper receipts. And the problem is that the manufacturers of these products, like let's say plastic water bottles, or now they have BPA-free plastic water bottles. I mean, they've had these for quite a while now, but there are other structural analogs such as BPS, BPF that could be just as bad. And the research shows that possibly even worse than BPA. So just because something is BPA-free does not mean that it is free of other chemicals, other xenoestrogens that can act as endocrine disrupting chemicals. I mean, they could disrupt the thyroid gland, they could disrupt other hormones, and they could also potentially be a factor in autoimmunity. So you want to do everything you can to minimize exposure to these xenoestrogens. I make a big deal about the plastic water bottles because there are people still buying plastic water bottles by the case, and they're drinking it day in, day out. And they could make a really big impact on their health just by making this change, which I know in some cases might not be easy. I mean, in many cases it is. Just stop buying them and get a filter, or drink water out of a glass bottle, something like Mountain Valley Springs. Definitely more expensive. Like if you're going to get a case of Mountain Valley Springs, it's definitely more expensive than getting a case of whatever plastic water bottles. There's so many different brands these days. But again, it's your health that you're talking about, and the health of many cases, not just you, but your family members, and unfortunately young children drinking out of plastic water bottles while they're still developing. Again, every now and then, not a big deal. But if this is your main source of water, I would definitely look elsewhere. Get another source, get a filter. Again, drink out of a glass bottle, Mountain Valley Springs, or another source. Flame retardants found in furniture, even clothing. So these are toxic. Many times I'll talk about the mattress. The mattress, not only flame retardants, but other chemicals. And I talk about the mattress sometimes because you should be spending at least a third, at the very least a quarter of your life in your bed sleeping, hopefully closer to a third of your life. So I'm not saying if you have a conventional mattress to discard it and get a more natural mattress. But if you are in the market, or you will be in the market for a mattress anytime soon, you want to look carefully when it comes to your mattress. I mean, we don't hesitate to spend whatever amount on a car. I mean, thousands of dollars on a car sometimes, or many times tens of thousands of dollars on a car. But many people will get the cheapest mattress that they could buy. And obviously you want a good mattress also for support in your spine, but also the toxin profile. And so, yeah, just something to consider. I mean, there are companies, Naturepedic, I believe, is one of them. Avocado mattress. Now, there has been some controversy with avocado and their certifications, but I still think they're really good compared to the conventional mattresses out there. And there are other companies as well. So you just need to do some research. And you could even visit, like when we were in the market for a mattress, we went to Asheville, North Carolina, which we're not too far from Asheville. So if you're on the West Coast or somewhere internationally, somewhere overseas, then you probably won't want to go to Asheville, but maybe there's someplace similar where you could actually stop somewhere and try out the mattresses. In this case, they had Naturepedic mattresses. They might have had other ones, but I remember specifically the Naturepedic mattresses. Parabens found in cosmetics. So just try to use natural cosmetics, natural cleaners. And again, it is a little bit costly, but it's when you think about it, it's not that much. It's not like food. I mean, I can understand trying to eat organic food is also something that's a good idea, just because the pesticides, herbicides, and that could add up because you're going through food a lot quicker than you are cosmetics and cleaners. So at least with the cosmetics cleaners, I would say to at least switch to natural cosmetics and cleaners that you're using on a regular basis. Like, for example, if you're using a spray to clean your home on a daily basis, then use a natural spray, or make your own using your own ingredients, like vinegar, apple cider vinegar, regular vinegar, baking soda. You can make your own concoction. You could go online to learn how to make your own, many sources. And so something like that, using every day. And same thing with cosmetics that you're using on a regular basis, as well as other cleaning products. And then I mentioned pesticides, herbicides. I mean, when it comes to the food you eat, trying to eat organic. Again, some will say it doesn't make a difference, but other studies demonstrate that it does make a difference. I'm willing to spend the extra money on organic. Again, I know everything adds up. At the very least, try to eat organic produce. If you eat meat, try to eat organic meat. And I realize it's more than just eating organic. For example, if you're eating beef, you arguably maybe even more important or just as important as making sure it's 100% grass-fed, so grass-fed, grass-finished. Yeah, so just be aware of the food that you're eating. And yeah, pesticides, a big problem. And not just in the foods we eat, but just being sprayed. So that's another thing too. If you're having a house regularly sprayed with pesticides, you might want to reconsider or try to look for more of a company that uses more natural products. Just again, I know there's a time and place, and the natural agents sometimes don't work as well as the chemicals. And I'm not saying there's never a time and place for the chemicals, but there are people, I mean, a lot of businesses use them, understandably, because again, you don't want to walk into a business and see bugs. But even in that case, maybe if they're doing it on a preventative basis, which many businesses are, they could look into a more natural option, because again, those pesticides will impact your health over time. Again, it could take decades, but so yeah, just again, something else to consider. There's solvents such as benzene, xylene, toluene. I mean, just think of all the sources, like things like gasoline fumes, cigarette smoke, motor vehicle exhaust, industrial emissions, even things like glues, paints. So, I mean, there's always so much you could do, obviously. I mean, if you're out and about, you're probably going to get exposed to some of these. But like, for example, if you go for a walk, you might not want to walk on a busy road where, especially like during rush hour in the morning or in the evening when there are a lot of cars, because you're going to be getting exposed to even more motor vehicle exhaust. So if you like to take a walk or a morning run or ride your bike, maybe go to a greenway, or a park, or even just like a neighborhood, like just a housing development, and ride around. Yeah, it saddens me when I see people trying to improve their health by, again, riding their bikes, running. And I know sometimes you might not have a choice, but if you do have a choice, I would not do it on a busy road. And some people live on a busy road, which that's another thing. Like if you live, especially like right near a highway, I realize you're probably not going to move anytime soon, but maybe in the future, that is an option, because again, it seems like an extreme measure, but just day in, day out, being exposed to all the motor vehicle exhaust from those cars definitely can take its toll on you over the years. And then paints, like things like just painting your home, you could get like low VOC paints or no VOC paints. Formaldehyde, another toxin found in building materials, adhesives, bonding agents. I mean, things like carpeting, if you have carpeting, I mean, there's other chemicals, not just formaldehyde potentially, but even like hardwood floors. Again, if you do hardwood floors like we have in our home, because regular hardwood floors also emit toxins such as VOCs. So take some work, I guess you could say detective work, just trying to find companies where there are natural options. But like I said, it can make a big difference in your health. If you are looking to do everything you can to save your thyroid, in addition to watching my videos on YouTube, you also might want to subscribe to my free online newsletter, which is called Healthy Gut, Healthy Thyroid. Not only will you get the latest news on how to heal your gut and restore your thyroid health, but during each edition, I'll demonstrate a different blood or functional medicine test marker that relates to healing your gut and or your thyroid. There will also be an Ask Dr. Eric section where not only can you see questions that other people have asked related to gut and thyroid health, but you can also submit a question for me to answer in a future edition. To subscribe to the Healthy Gut, Healthy Thyroid newsletter, please visit savemythyroid.com/newsletter. Mycotoxins from mold is a big problem. A lot of people have mold issue, and it's not always visible. So you might not have any visible molds in your home, but it could be behind walls, underneath the floor. If you have a crawl space, it could be in there. And so you could test your home for mold. There's different companies. Immunolytics is one, Mycometrics, another company, but seeing if there's mold in the home. There's also tests where you could test your levels, such as it's a urine test. So Mosaic Diagnostics and Real-Time Laboratories are two of the more popular tests that will look at mycotoxins in the body. Glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup. So that just eating organic will help. It's not going to get rid of the glyphosate, but will reduce the amount of glyphosate you're exposed to. And there are many more. I mean, I mentioned xenoestrogens, but I didn't really get into like microplastics, but I do plan on having another episode and possibly might even be out by the time this episode is out. But if not, it probably will be not too long after this. But I would like to have or do plan, not would like to, do plan on having an episode. It might just be a Q&A episode, and eventually might have an expert talk about microplastics, nanoplastics. Another big problem. So before I talk more about how to optimize detoxification, how to eliminate toxins from your body, reduce your toxic burden, you might be wondering if you should test for toxins. And I do some testing for toxins. I mean, there's a few different options out there. The problem is that you can't possibly test for all toxins out there. So for example, it's very common to test for heavy metals. There's urine testing, there's hair testing. I mean, I like testing for heavy metals, but even if things look good on one of these tests, it doesn't mean that you're in the clear, because you could have these other toxins I'm exposed to. I mean, these other toxins that I mentioned that I am being exposed to. We're all being exposed to these, but yeah. So again, if maybe you do a test for heavy metals and they look okay, but you have problems with mycotoxins, or you have, again, most of us have, pretty much all of us have xenoestrogen exposure, plastic exposure, glyphosate exposure. You could test for glyphosate. I'm not saying everybody should test for glyphosate and mycotoxins, but again, you could do comprehensive testing. I can't say I do this on most people. I do some basic testing for heavy metals, and regardless of what that shows, I assume that everybody has an elevated toxic burden. So I'm always doing some things to support detoxification, which I'll talk about shortly. There is also an interesting test by the company Cyrex Labs called the Array 11, which looks at the immune system response to certain environmental toxins. So for example, most tests out there, like urine testing, hair testing, it's looking at the levels, but just because you have high levels doesn't mean you're reacting negatively. And also, just because you have low levels doesn't mean everything's good. You could have a low level of a toxin, but still have a loss of that chemical tolerance I mentioned earlier, and still have issues with lower levels of toxins. So the Array 11 looks at the immune system response to different environmental toxins, such as heavy metals, such as, I believe, parabens, formaldehyde, even a few mycotoxins, a few or mold. I mean, it's a really, really good test. I don't use it as much as I probably should, because it's not a cheap test. And like I said, I do assume that people have an increased toxic burden. So it's not like I'm not doing anything. But if someone is in a situation where the thyroid antibodies are struggling to normalize or even decrease, if they're heading in the wrong direction, and you're already, let's say you're doing a lot for detoxification, you still might want to look into this, because maybe there's one or two toxins you're reacting to, and you just need to do a better job of avoiding exposure to these, as well as doing a better job of detoxification. So again, just something to consider. And then when it comes to reducing a toxic burden, I have some other podcast episodes, including other experts who have spoken about this. I have articles. I have a two-part article on my website, naturalendocrinesolutions.com, on how to optimize detoxification. And I'll try to remember to include the links in the show notes, which you could check out by visiting savemythyroid.com. And so a few things I'll mention here when it comes to reducing your toxic burden. So first, detoxification is nutrient dependent. and not just vitamins and minerals, although those certainly are important, making sure you're getting enough vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, but amino acids are important as well. And so if you're nutrient deficient, that will affect detoxification. So another reason to eat whole, healthy foods. There is a place for supplementation, but it's not or shouldn't be a replacement for eating a whole, healthy foods diet. And then also keep in mind there's 3 phases of detoxification. I'm not going to go into great detail because, again, I discussed these in the articles. And again, I'll include the links to those in the show notes. But there's a phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And phase 1 is actually you get the development of a reactive intermediate, which is if you're not having healthy phase 2, where you're clearing out, it's making that reactive intermediate more water soluble, then that's not a good thing. So you want healthy phase 1, healthy phase 2, and then phase 3 is the actual elimination, excretion of the toxins, which happens through urine, happens through feces. So, I mean, if you're constipated, that's not going to be a good thing. So again, all 3 phases of detoxification are important. And again, I talk about these in greater detail elsewhere. It's also important to understand that there are genetic variations that are very common that could affect detoxification. And it doesn't mean that you need to do genetic testing, although sometimes that could be helpful and could give clues on why maybe you need more detox support than other people, because some people could get away with basic detoxification, whereas other people cannot. Again, I in this day and age, it's really difficult to do it through diet alone. I will say that. I mean, I try to do a lot through diet, especially eating green leafy vegetables. And I mean, vegetables in general, not just green leafy vegetables, like cruciferous vegetables, really good. But as I mentioned, it's not just vegetables, because you need amino acids, and you're really not going to get your amino acids from the vegetables. So getting enough protein is important. Again, so just eating a wide variety of foods, but supplements can also be helpful to support detoxification. So supplements can help to at least aid in correcting nutrient deficiencies in combination with a healthy diet. But then there are also agents such as N-acetylcysteine, or NAC, which is a precursor to glutathione, and that could support detoxification. I really like NAC, can be effective, pretty cost effective compared to some other supplements. Alpha-lipoic acid also can help to support detoxification as well as reduce oxidative stress. As can NAC. NAC is an antioxidant, so that could also help as well. You could just take glutathione, like a liposomal glutathione. Many are familiar with the herb milk thistle, which increases the endogenous or internal levels of glutathione. Schisandra is an herb that could support detoxification. There are others as well. So again, I'm not going to cover all of them here, but keep in mind, it's not just about the liver. You have lymphatics that play a role in detoxification. Your kidneys are important. So, I mean, with the lymphatics, just movements, like regular movements is important. So not just going to the gym 3 times a week, but moving throughout the day, doing rebounding is really good. Dry brushing can help to support the lymphatics. And with the kidneys, just making sure you're well hydrated could go a long way, which a lot of people don't drink enough water. And you could do other things to eliminate toxins and toxicants from your body. So sweating the toxins, either through sauna or exercise. Just make sure, especially if you're doing sauna, you want to replenish the electrolytes, because you not only will lose toxins, you won't only eliminate toxins and toxicants, but you also will lose minerals, colonics, like colon hydrotherapy. I can't say I do colonics. Same thing with coffee enemas. I mean, those can also support detoxification. So sauna, I do on a regular basis, like 3 times a week. If someone has unmanaged hyperthyroidism, where their heart rate is really high, like in the 90s or even triple digits, you might want to hold off on doing sauna just because it will further increase your heart rate. And then, of course, you want to do everything you can to minimize your exposure to environmental toxins and toxicants. You want to try to eliminate toxins, but part of reducing your toxic burden is not only eliminating toxins, detoxifying, but also minimizing exposure to these environmental toxins. So just a reminder that when retesting your thyroid antibodies. If they're decreasing, heading in the right direction, awesome. If not, obviously there are other episodes in this series. I spoke about different factors, but this episode specifically talk about environmental toxins and where we tend to overlook these at times. So again, if you're hitting a roadblock in your recovery, especially with those antibodies, don't rule out the impact of environmental toxins. So that is pretty much all I want to discuss. And before wrapping up this video, I want to ask if you have done anything to reduce your toxic burden. Please let me know in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about how to save your thyroid and regain your health, then I highly recommend to watch one of my free webinars on thyroid health. And I'll make sure to include a link in the description below this video. Thank you so much for watching this. Give this video a like if you learned something new, and consider subscribing if you want to learn more about how to save your thyroid.